Can we now move to the next speaker that is from Shift to Rail, Judit SANDOR.
Yes, good morning to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'm very sorry that I couldn't be with you today. It was the plan, but as it was already mentioned before, there are some other circumstances that stop me to be with you today. But I'm very glad to present the contribution of Shift to Rail, or now it's Europe's Rail joint undertaking activities that help the competitiveness of the railway sector. And the title of my presentation is The Role of Standardization in Innovation. So I think this fits perfectly to the statement and the introduction that Gian Osvaldo just made in the beginning of this session. So it's good to see that we are all aligned on this matter. So if we go to the next slide, please, to the introduction slide. I think the Shift to Rail is now known in the sector, so there is no need for introducing it. It's a great instrument to pooling all the European rail research under one umbrella. And it started in 2015. And what we have reached now by 2021, end of 2021, is that 920 million euro was awarded to different projects and activities within the joint undertaking. Also, it's an open organization, so more than 400 participants were contributing to the work of Shift to Rail, of course, including the members, the funding and associated members, who are almost 30. And this collaboration also helping SMEs and research centers to contribute to the rail research agenda. If we go to the next slide, this is showing the program of the joint undertaking. And as the title also says, the railway is a system of systems. So that's why it's important that the performance of the railways is considered system level, and not only focusing on subsystems, but considering as a whole, in order to make the biggest impact and benefit and the performance gain that rail can contribute to, which is very important when we are talking about competitiveness and improving the rail performance and the rail presence in the multimodal transport environment. So that's why the scope of the Shift to Rail joint undertaking is covering the different subsystems, but trying to cover in a holistic approach. And the activities within horizontal activities that are contributing to the different subsystems, like energy, noise and vibration, or standardization, they are covered in the cross-cutting activities. So what is also important, and what also Gian Osvaldo said in the beginning, that when we are talking about research, then we should also look into the impact on standardization and on the regulatory aspect, and having a common strategy, build a common strategy, because this will help us to ensure a proper market uptake, and also to ensure to maintain the competitiveness of the railway sector, the railway industry. Also, when we are talking or looking into the global, globally and not only on Europe. So within these cross-cutting activities, there was one area on that specifically on standardization. So if you go to the next slide, you will see the three main pillars that this activity is focusing on. So first of all, that capitalize and bring value of the Shift to Rail outcomes by contributing to the standardization activities. Also trying to contribute to the regulatory aspects, like closing open point of the TSI, or considering now the DSI 2022 package, the Shift2Rail contributions are there and discussed at the various working group meetings. And also to see how to improve the processes for standardization, because as we know that now the life is very accelerated, and we have to react quickly to the new trends, new technologies and new solutions that are popping up. So it's important that the standardization is accelerated, or the process to standardize is also accelerated and meets the current needs and the current speed of this evolution. So that's why it's important that we also see how these processes can be optimized and ensure that it's following the speed that is required. So now I would like to, if you go to the next slide, you will see the different tools that in Shift2Rail we use in order to support the contribution to standardization. And so you see the three main work streams. So first of all, the first one is understand what Shift2Rail is contributing to with regards to regulation and standards. So this is a collection of information, mapping the activities, mapping what is the standardization needs and opportunities that are coming from the program. And after that, analyzing them, assessing them, and seeing that how these benefits could be implemented and provided to the ongoing or future activities when we are talking about regulation and standards. So this is the first step. And then for that, there is a tool, there is a living document that is updated, that is collecting all this information in order to understand that how the Shift2Rail activities contribute to the regulatory and standardization framework. Then the next point is, of course, coordination, communication. So when we know what is Shift2Rail is going to contribute to, also to make awareness and communicate to the right forums and stakeholders what is coming out from the program. And for this, of course, there is some important forums to mention. Of course, RASCOP and JPCR on the standardization level, and at the regulatory level, the TSI working group meetings, or when we are talking about the ERTMS, the EECT meetings. So here now, what the latest achievements were with regards to Shift2Rail that contributed to the standardization, the preparation of the Commission standardization request, and then also identifying possible inputs to the TSI revision package 2022. And then the third, if you go back for a second, sorry, and the third point is that also alignment. So make sure that the areas and the activities that are coming out are aligned with the timing, with the area of scope of activities that are outside of Shift2Rail. So, and in order to ensure that there are synergies, or if there are misalignments, then ensure that there is an agreement and an early warning or early identification of possible adaptation in order to ensure that there is a full alignment with the sector. So now I would like to go into the details of all these three tools that I have presented. If you go to the first one, so the next slide, sorry, to the next slide, then you will see a visual example of the outcome of the standardization rolling development plan. So this is the collection of standardization and regulatory inputs that are expected from the Shift2Rail program and identified. So here you can see an example at TCMS, and I am also very happy to see that in the program you will have a much more technical presentation done by the Connecta project, so the Shift2Rail experts. So here you see that what is important, that the projects are screened, so there is a better understanding and an assessment what are the potential trends and contribution to standards, then also identifying the exact contribution, the areas, and after that also to see which are the relevant standardization organizations or bodies, and which are the specific working groups or activities where this information and this knowledge can be fed into. So this is very important in order to help the communication and the coordination that will be presented at the next slide. Because of course, it's as we said, if we would like to make, if rail wants to remain competitive and meet the current challenges and needs, then it's important that the standardization paths are also well defined and agreed at sectorial level. So that's why here there is a process that identifies how Shift2Rail inputs can feed into the standardization flow. And what I would like to mainly highlight is that, which is on the right side of this slide, which is very important, is the communication and the coordination work with the different standardization and regulatory platforms. So here that they are aware what is coming out from Shift2Rail, and based on the input that is provided, if there are already ongoing standardization activities in the standardization bodies, in the working groups of the standardization bodies, then the links are easily defined. But if there are more complex topics, there are new topics which needs to be further discussed and further aligned because it's a new topic, or there are no standards yet available, like when we are talking about DAC, it's very important that before starting the standardization, there is also an agreement on this, on what should be done, what should be the scope, and what are the requirements, and have a proper timeline for developing this standard. And for this, it's important to identify some specific working groups that collect all the relevant stakeholders and discuss and come up with a coordinated and agreed standardization path for these new topics as well. If you go to the next slide, you will see that there were already some workshops organized. Either they were launched by the joint undertaking, but there were other areas. If you go back, please, I will speed up. So some of them were launched by the joint undertaking, but some other ones, like if you see on the slide with regards to ticketing, this was launched by the Senelec working groups in order to have a coordinated approach. And here Shift2Rail joined this discussion in order to ensure that the inputs and the scope of the work are fully aligned. So this is important when we want to ensure that the standards are developed at the right time and the right place. So, and today I am very pleased to see in the agenda that there are quite a lot of Shift2Rail presentations, mainly in the digital panel, but also in other areas. So this shows that this coordination work and this alignment is working well, and there is an awareness on the activities and the work carried out in the joint undertaking. So if you go to the next slide, please. Then I'm going to talk about the future that is already mentioned by Leonardo and Vavka. So that the new joint undertaking, Europe's Rail JU, entered into force on the 30th of November. And so this means that now there is this transitional period. Please also bear in mind that the website, the title of the website, the Shift to Rail, is going to change. Also, our email addresses are going to change, or changing. It's now rail-research.europa.eu and not anymore Shift to Rail. And for such a transition, it's important that we ensure that the lessons learned and the good practices are continuing and taken up by the new entity. So if you go to the next slide, you will see the draft scope of the joint undertaking. As the master plan is still in a draft version, you can see it on the Rail Research Europa website. But what is important and what I would like to highlight here, that beyond the innovation pillar, what is a step change in the new program, that there is going to be the system pillar also introduced. So beyond innovation, there is also focusing on the core and identifying the functional rail system architecture for the future. And this should be a common and a coordinated work done by the whole sector in order to better ensure the interoperability and the evolution of the system in a coordinated and harmonized manner. So here, within the system pillar, definitely the work on regulation and standardization will continue. And that's why what is the important takeaway, that all the processes and guidelines that have been developed within Shift to Rail shouldn't stop when we are now coming to the end of Shift to Rail. It should be taken up, it should be adapted, it should be reused, and should be the starting point for the future rail research, in order to ensure that the good practices and this good work done by these many experts will continue and will further evolve and support to ensure the competitiveness of the railway sector in the future as well. So I thank you for your attention, and I am available also for questions.
Thank you, Judith.